Today we're going to read Mincemeat and the Incredible Train Ride, written by Lois Davis, who has very kindly sent me the book to read to you. The notice at Candy Floss Central Station was written in bold letters. Mr. Clarence Clippet, Station Master, Candy Floss Central. Mr. Clippet had twinkly eyes and a moustache that looked like a brush. As well as being the station master, he would board the trains, passing through the carriages, checking and clipping tickets, as his name suggested. Candy Floss Central was the main station at the end of the line, the terminus, where all the trains began and ended their journeys. It was a grand-looking station, with a magnificent glass roof and 6 separate platforms outside the main concourse. Zane, whose home was one of the long train sheds at Candy Floss Central, was the youngest locomotive in the fleet, and a very, very handsome looking train. He hauled masses of carriages behind his colossal black engine. His carriages were painted bright red with the Candy Floss Central Railway Company written in gold lettering on every single carriage door. The carriage seats were made from ancient beech and polished to gleaming. Here we have a picture of Clarence Clippet with his bushy moustache. It was easy to spot Zane's driver, Berkeley Butterfingers, for invariably he had an oily rag in his hand or stuffed in the top left-hand pocket of his equally oily overalls. Berkeley Butterfingers loved his job. Even when Berkeley had a day off, he would spend it in the train shed polishing the carriages, causing Zane to have a satisfied sigh. Zane enjoyed carrying the passengers to all the stations along the route and knew each station well. He was a very contented train, but he had a dream to be an express train. There's Berkeley polishing Zane. I can just hear him sighing now. Great-grandma returned from the village to find conkers by her front door. There were conkers going up the stairs and conkers in the sitting room. In the kitchen, there were conkers on top of the cupboards. What are all these conkers doing around the cottage, Mincemeat? I thought they were for your cake. Mincemeat was great-grandma's cheerfully chubby, baking-mad ginger cat. Oh no, great-grandma, the sweet chestnuts are for my cake, he said, pointing to the oven where the cake was baking. He'd collected the chestnuts from the sweet chestnut tree in the cottage garden that morning. At the same time, he'd collected conkers from the horse chestnut tree, taking extra care to ensure that he didn't get the two mixed up. Conkers are poisonous if you eat them. I made small holes in each conker to keep the spiders away, as they don't like the smell. You know I don't like spiders, especially the ones with long, tickly legs. You're really very clever, Mincemeat. I've learnt something new today. Great-grandma and Mincemeat were going to visit Great-grandma's Aunt Petunia, who lived in the countryside at Field Meadows, and so Mincemeat was busy organising a scrumptious picnic to take with them. He'd inherited his love of baking from his grandma Twinkle, who now lived in Flossie Feline's old age home for cats. As she was too old to bake and sew anymore, she'd given Mincemeat her precious recipe book, as well as her sewing machine. Mincemeat loved sewing almost as much as he loved baking. He always wore his I Love Cooking apron whenever he was busy baking in the kitchen. As the cake baked in the oven, a buttery caramel smell wafted up Mincemeat's nose. The radio was playing one of his favourite tunes. Closing his eyes with his outstretched paws, he swayed to the music whilst breathing in the luscious smell. And down there we have a picture of a spider with its tickly legs and the conkers to try and keep him away. And then on the next page, the I Love Cooking apron, and I'm guessing Mincemeat is swaying to the music. The timer on the oven pinged, awakening him from his daydream. He put on his oven gloves and carefully lifted the cake out of the oven, sitting it on a wire rack. While he waited for the cake to cool, Mincemeat fried dandelions and nettles until they were extremely crispy, one of Great-grandma's favourites, and mashed up some mackerel for himself. When the cooking was done, Mincemeat packed everything into a wicker picnic basket on top of a red checked cloth. The following morning, before they left for the train station, he packed the final items: some cheese-flavoured chocolate for great-grandma, a bottle of cherryade, and finally a bottle of cat milk. Although he loved cheese, Mincemeat knew he must never eat chocolate. It could make him very ill indeed. Mincemeat handed great-grandma her crash helmet before helping her climb into the sidecar of his motorbike, giving her the picnic basket to hold after putting his own crash helmet and black biker suit. He jumped onto the driver's seat and revved up the engine. The nearest station to the village of How Do You Do, where great-grandma and Mincemeat lived, was Muddlewich. It was called Muddlewich because everything in the station was so muddled up. To buy your ticket, you had to climb a ladder, as the ticket office was on the roof of the station. The waiting room was outside the station at the bus stop. The pointed hands on the large-faced clock on the main concourse often got stuck, ensuring passengers ran all over the place thinking they'd missed their trains. When it got to 6 o'clock, the hands of the clock whizzed round and round so fast that nobody could tell the time at all. When they got to Muddlewich station, Mincemeat parked up the bike in the bike bay. He found a seat for great-grandma in the waiting room in the bus stop and then went to buy the tickets, climbing the ladder to the ticket office and waiting his turn. The train was leaving Candyfloss Central at exactly 8:52 a.m. The first stop would be Muddlewich at 9:30. Approaching the ticket booth, he said, 2 tickets to Field Mouse Meadow, please. It was the last stop on the line. And there he is, climbing the ladder up to the ticket station. Whoever came up with that idea. At 8:30 in the morning, Candyfloss Central was busy and noisy. People bustled this way and that, passing each other as they went in opposite directions, running for their trains. Grabbing a newspaper from the kiosk and hurriedly paying the vendor, those passengers catching the 8:52 at platform 5 were now dashing down the platform to get on board the train. Clarence Clippett blew hard on his whistle, a sharp, shrill note over the din of the station. Everybody on board now, please. Everybody on board. Feeling the last of the passengers hurriedly board the train, Zane felt a tingle of excitement as the journey was about to begin. Clarence jumped into the driver's cab next to Berkeley and then leant out of the window to look down the platform one last time, making sure all the train's doors were shut. Berkeley started up the engine. Zane moved slowly along the platform and out of the station into the sunshine of a bright, warm day, his engine making a soothing chugga-chugga sound, his wheels a clickety-clack rhythmic beat on the track. Zane arrived at Muddlewich at 9:30 precisely. As he came to a halt, passengers began opening doors and stepping down from the train, while the people on the platform who were waiting to get on stood aside. Holding out his great furry paw, Mincemeat helped great-grandma onto the train before climbing on board himself. They found 2 seats by the window and settled themselves down, sitting opposite each other. Great-grandma loved looking out at the passing countryside during the journey. After springing down from the driver's cab, Clarence Clippett strode up and down the platform, making sure that all the doors were closed before they left Muddlewich. He gave another short, sharp blast on his whistle, ran back to the front of the train and hopped on board next to Berkeley. Zane glided out of the station. And there's Mincemeat helping great-grandma. It was a beautiful day. As they chugged through the countryside, they passed fields and farms. Hedges ran in between the fields, dividing them. There were cows and sheep grazing peacefully. 3 horses stood in the shade of a clump of trees near to the track, looking decidedly sleepy. Further along the journey, a farmer was out in his red tractor. working to gather hay for the cattle for the incoming winter months. As the enormous tyres drove the tractor forwards, the hay baler, trailing behind, collected the hay, spitting out a round bale. When it was too cold to stay outside, the cattle would come in from the fields and live cosily in the barns, feeding on the hay until spring. The sheep, though, would stay outdoors, their thick woolly coats keeping them warm and dry from rain and snow. The next station was Lilac Hill. Everywhere you looked, there were hundreds and hundreds of pale violet lilacs. They were in hanging baskets along the platform, and the rooftop of the ticket office was covered in lilacs too. The flower stall and the platform sold nothing but lilacs. Mincemeat had never seen anything like it. Suddenly, he had an idea. He would buy a bunch of lilacs for Great-Grandma. He leapt up from his seat and dashed off the train, pushing the door with such force that it slammed behind him, muffling poor Great-Grandma as she called out, "Jumping jackdaws, Mincemeat, where are you going?" There's the train station at Lilac Hill with all of those lilacs. He ran over to the flower stall and picked the biggest bunch of lilacs he could find, scrabbling about in his purse for the right money. Clarence Clippet hadn't seen Mincemeat leap from the train. As all the doors were shut, Clarence blew his whistle and jumped into the driver's cab next to Berkeley. Zane began moving along the platform and out of the station. On hearing the whistle, Mincemeat turned around to get back on the train, but it was too late. Great-Grandma was bouncing up and down, banging on the window. "Mincemeat! Mincemeat!" she cried. Clarence and Berkeley hadn't noticed Mincemeat at all, or seen that he was now running faster and faster with the bunch of flowers, trying to catch the train. "Wait for me! Wait for me!" shouted Mincemeat, bolting down the platform as hard as he could. Just as the last carriage of the train was coming towards the end of the platform, Clarence thought he heard shouting. "Apply the brakes, Berkeley," he ordered. "I can hear someone in trouble." By this time Mincemeat was bent over, his paws on his knees, gasping for breath. His fur had fluffed out in all directions. Berkeley slammed on the brakes, the train screeching to a stop. Clarence Clippet ran back through the carriages. "Mr. Clippet, is Mincemeat all right?" "Yes, don't worry, Great-Grandma. Can't stop now, though." The last carriage wasn't completely out of the station. Bounding off the train, Clarence rushed over to Mincemeat and put his arm around him. Mincemeat took a few moments to catch his breath. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Clippet. I never meant to cause all this upset. It's just that I really wanted to buy a bunch of lilacs for Great-Grandma." The lilacs by this time were looking rather sad and floppy. Is Mincemeat running after the train? His fur going in all directions. "Don't you worry, Mincemeat. You were being generous and thoughtful. Sit here on the bench whilst I go into the station office and get you a glass of water." A moment later, Clarence came back with the water, and Mincemeat downed it thirstily. "Which carriage were you sitting in?" asked Clarence. "Carriage number 3, I think." Berkeley was leaning out of the window of his driver's cab, looking down the platform. "Reverse the train, please, Berkeley," yelled Clarence. "We need a carriage number 3 up here." Berkeley pulled the big gear lever into reverse, and Zane moved slowly backwards down the platform. Clarence helped the exhausted Mincemeat up and into the carriage. Great-Grandma was still sitting by the window. "Don't be upset with him, Great-Grandma. Mincemeat was being so thoughtful." "Oh, I could never be upset with Mincemeat. He's far too lovely for that." Putting her arm around Mincemeat, she took the sad-looking lilacs from him. "Thank you, Mincemeat. It was so sweet of you. You sit down and enjoy the rest of the journey. I'm just glad you're safe." There's Nanny sitting by the window. Clarence's voice sounded over the tannoy. "Next station, Bumblebee Bridge. Bumblebee Bridge, next station." Passengers began gathering their belongings together. Mincemeat had fallen asleep after his adventure, and he awoke feeling rather hungry. Great-grandma opened the picnic basket. The train journey took them part way along the coast, Zane travelling on the track high above the sea. The views were wonderful, and they could see a boat coming into the harbour at Popcorn Cove. The picnic lasted until they slowed into Popcorn Cove station. As the carriage door opened, a whole family of seagulls elbowed their way in. Chatting noisily, they tried to decide where to sit, pushing and shoving each other. One of the baby seagulls spotted the remains of the picnic. Without asking, he snatched the last fried dandelion and he gobbled it down greedily. His mother was cross. "Cedric, you naughty boy, you don't just help yourself to other people's food, and especially without asking. Too late now, you've eaten it. You apologise now to the lady and her lovely cat." Cedric hung his head. "I'm sorry." I think that's a picture of Cedric getting told off. "Good boy, now all of you come and sit down nicely. No more pushing and shoving, and certainly no squawking." They all did as they were told, sitting in a row, looking out of the window until they got to the next station, Frog's Leap, where they all got off and waddled down the platform. As Zane was coming back down the track, away from the sea, he decided it was now or never to turn himself into an express train. Berkeley was steering him as usual when Zane unexpectedly accelerated. He sped under bridges, whizzing past fields. Going so fast, the trees along the side of the track blew furiously about. Berkeley couldn't stop him. Zane was having so much fun, he was laughing. The passengers couldn't believe what was happening as the countryside shot past their windows. Great-grandma thought it was wonderful. Oh, how positively exciting. Mincemeat's fur was blowing flat against his face from the force of the wind coming in through the open window. Berkeley was trying to slow Zane down, but Zane was having far too much fun for that. He went faster than ever. He raced past a lake, the swans on the lake stopping and staring at the express train, for they couldn't believe their eyes. Look at the smile on his face. He likes going fast. Clarence's voice boomed over the tannoy. "Next station, Hamster Heights. Hamster Heights, next station. Zane, will you please slow down at once?" But Zane didn't. He hurtled right through the station. On he flew, laughing all the way. By now people had heard about the express train, and they were coming out of their houses and rushing onto the bridges above the railway track to see the runaway train. Farmers stopped what they were doing and ran to the edges of their field to have a better look. But the policeman from the nearby village of Willow Green was waiting with his bicycle to go over to the railway crossing safely. He was standing by the barrier when Zane thundered through. Zane must have been doing 100 miles an hour. "Dancing dormice," Bert explained. "Whatever is going on?" He knew Zane and Berkeley well and would usually wave to them as they waited to cross the track. But today he just stood there, open-mouthed, on board the train. Great-grandma still thought it was all very exciting. Mincemeat wasn't so sure. Zane thought it was very funny and was laughing harder than ever. "Whatever are we to do, Mr. Clippet?" asked Berkeley. Clarence looked serious. He scratched his head as he thought. "There's only one thing we can do, Berkeley. I'll have to pull the emergency cord." The next station was Duckling Down, where Clarence saw the station coming into view. He yanked hard on the emergency cord. Zane's wheels made the greatest screeching sound as he came to an abrupt stop alongside the platform. There's Clarence pulling the emergency cord, and Berkeley looking rather panicked. By this time, Zane was quite out of breath, and he knew he was in trouble. Berkeley and Clarence Clippet got down from the driver's cab. "Whatever do you think you were doing?" said Berkeley to Zane crossly. My passengers have missed their stop at Hampstead Heights. Zane was panting, trying to catch his breath. Well, barked Clarence, what have you got to say for yourself? Zane coughed and said in a very deep, sorrowful voice, all I wanted was to be an express train. Well, you certainly were, said Clarence. If you were bored, Zane, you should have told Berkeley, and we could have talked about it. Maybe we could have changed the route to make it more interesting for you. I'm sure we could have sorted something out. I'm sorry, said Zane. I never meant to cause trouble. Honestly, I didn't. Clarence could see that the train was truly sorry. Teardrops welled up in Zane's eyes. Poor old Zane. He just wanted to be an express train. Clarence took out his big white handkerchief from his waistcoat pocket and dried Zane's eyes. Don't cry, said Clarence, but if you ever have a problem or you feel unhappy, please remember it's always best to talk about it. After such an adventure, Zane was tired, so he rested a duckling down before continuing the journey. As the passengers settled back down, they were all chattering about what had happened. Clarence passed through the carriages. Tickets, please, tickets, please. Any more tickets now? I'm so sorry some of you missed your stop at Hampstead Heights. No one seemed to mind at all, saying they all had really enjoyed the ride. The next stop was Marshmallow Ridge. Everything here was made of marshmallows. The ticket office, the waiting room, the benches on the platform too, which were soft and springy. There was a sweet shop on the platform that only sold marshmallows, of course. I'd love a bag of marshmallows, thought Mincemeat. A little boy got on the train with his mother and came and sat right next to Mincemeat. The little boy was clutching a paper bag full to the top with marshmallows. Silently stretching out his arm, he offered the bag to Mincemeat. Thank you, said Mincemeat. That's so kind of you. Marshmallows are my favourites, but I once choked on a marshmallow and I'm not allowed them anymore. Zane chugged through the open countryside until they approached Sweet Corn Central. Next station, Sweet Corn Central. Sweet Corn Central, next station. Not many passengers got on at Sweet Corn Central, as the station after that was Field Mouse Meadows, the last stop of the line. Mincemeat settled down to read a new cookery book. Great-grandma fell fast asleep. There's our picture of Clarence taking the tickets, and I'm guessing he's apologising as well. Zane was exhausted. He pulled into the station platform of Field Mouse Meadows slowly, coming to a stop with a gentle jolt. Clarence decided that as Zane was so weary, he should spend the night there in the train shed, returning to Candyfloss Central in the morning. Great-grandma woke up as Clarence made his final announcement over the tannoy. Last stop, Field Mouse Meadows, he said. Field Mouse Meadows, now. Last stop. Please make sure you have all your belongings with you. I would like to thank you all for travelling with the Candyfloss Central Railway Company and hope you've enjoyed your journey, especially all of the excitement today. Mincemeat put his cookery book away in the picnic basket. Clutching the basket, he stepped down onto the platform and then helped Great-grandma get off the train. Aunt Petunia was waiting in her beautiful car outside the station to meet them. The car was made from a huge old pumpkin and had purple curtains at the windows. Great-grandma got in beside Aunt Petunia, and Mincemeat sat in the back with the wicker basket on his knees. The old pumpkin car rattled along country lanes. Great-grandma and Aunt Petunia chattered away, whilst Mincemeat enjoyed the scenery. Well, look at that for a car. I'm starting to think I need a new car. I might get one of those. Soon enough they arrived at Aunt Petunia's cottage in Lupin Lane. Whilst Aunt Petunia made a pot of tea, Mincemeat lifted out the red check cloth from the picnic basket and carefully unwrapped the chestnut cake he'd made the day before. He placed it on a tray and carried it through to the garden where they had tea whilst sitting in the sunshine. "Now then, do you have any interesting news?" inquired Aunt Petunia. Great-grandma chuckled. "Oh, indeed we have, don't we, Mincemeat?" Aunt Petunia could hardly believe her ears. "My goodness me," she said, "after hearing the story, what an exciting day." They all agreed it had been the most exciting day. And there they are, having their picnic with their cake. Oh, I'll tell you what, I could go for a bit of cake right now. And after reading that, I think I just might. You probably should as well. Go have some cake.